All right. Hello. Welcome everybody to the SIG Docs weekly meeting. This is the first meeting in a while post holidays. I think we had about 2 weeks off or so. Personally speaking, as I just mentioned, I have been in a holiday funk. So this might be a quick SIG Docs holiday meeting, but nevertheless, it's great to see everybody. Today is January 5th, 2021 officially. Before moving on, is there any new contributors on the call? I see a lot of friendly faces. Taylor Chaparro, I don't believe we've met. Do you care to introduce yourself? If not, no problem at all.
Yeah, no problem. I am a software engineer looking to get more actively participating in the Kubernetes community. So, yeah, hi, nice to meet you.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome. Definitely, you're in the right spot, and feel free to ask any questions, throw anything out in chat there. If anything's confusing or ambiguous, I know we throw around things that might seem normal or general terminology that seems standard to us that newcomers might find hard to follow, and we're happy to make that easier to understand. You know, we're here to help other folks find ways that they can help. Cool. Anyone else just joining for the first time?
Hi everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
There we go. Oh wait, 1 second. My video is showing up.
There it is.
Oh, there we go. Yay, okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of here because I've been working with Kubernetes for a long time. I'm an instructor, but I've never really contributed to the project at all. And I thought if I was going to do that anywhere, I'd want to know how that works with documentation, because I think that's the most fun part is documentation.
Awesome. Welcome. Much like I mentioned with Taylor as well, feel free to interject. This is relatively an informal gathering. Find us in Slack, ask questions. We're here to help out. So sounds good.
Okay,
Welcome.
thank
Good
you.
to see some new faces. Moving on to the updates or reminders. So first of all, many thanks to Brad Topol for getting our PR Angular shifter, our schedule together for 2021. So a big round of applause there for Brad. For folks who don't know, every week there's a PR Wrangler. What this is a person in the Kubernetes community, specifically for SIG Docs, with approver status that essentially makes sure that there's no PRs that are gunked up and that we're actually merging and approving, closing PRs, pull requests, etc. So that's a role that most approvers or all approvers should fulfill at least a couple times throughout the year. And Brad threw that schedule together, and many thanks. So Brad put it together, and Brad is also the PR Wrangler this week, so he must be a glutton for punishment. And next week is Tim Bannister, SF Tim, on the call. And approvers, make sure you know your PR Wrangler shift and go check that out on GitHub for the new dates. If we need to switch things around, we can. And moving on to the agenda. So first things first, the 121 release. Ray or someone on the call want to give us an update on that?
Yeah, I have a few things. The release cycle actually officially starts next week. The shadow application ends this Friday. Also created a PR to update the docs role handbook. That's still open, just created this morning. And that just added some things to how to track KEP reviewers, improvers for a tech review for the docs. Also synced master into the dev 1.21 branch, and that went through with no errors. And that was merged also this morning. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. And for the folks that are joining us today, so every 3 months, I believe it's now every 4 months, there's a Kubernetes release. And part of the SIG Docs special interest group, we have a smaller subgroup that is part of the SIG release. There's a ton of SIGs. But SIG release is in charge of actually getting Kubernetes out the door, and the subgroup, the SIG Docs Doc SIG release subgroup is responsible for making sure documentation goes out the door with that release. So part of our weekly meeting, we track the release as it progresses, as well as make sure there's anything we can, help out with, block, things of that nature. But in general, and I'm hopefully not jinxing this for Ray here, in general, we find that the release cycle is pretty calm for docs early on. There's not a ton to do, and then really things kind of catch on fire towards the end there.
That's true.
Cool. All right, moving on. For the blog update, is there anyone on the call who wants to give us an update on the blog? Hearing a whole lot of nothing. I will say blog is great.
It's going to come up shortly, though, with a thing I'm going to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, so we can circle back then and talk about Tim's piece there regarding the blog. All right, moving on to issues and PRs. Celeste, do you want to take this one away?
Yeah, so there are 2 PRs here that I'm kind of bringing to SIG Docs in kind of representing the working group naming as well. So the first is a fairly large update to one of the tutorials. The stated intention of this update was to remove kind of inappropriate terminology around master and slave. However, Paul Czar also took the opportunity to replace MongoDB with Redis in this example, which is a very, very large change. From a working group naming perspective, this is good to go. This has our sign off. What we need at this point is a SIG Docs review as to whether this is still okay. Stephen Augustus has taken a look at it, and from both mine and his perspective, it is still teaching the fundamental Kubernetes thing that needs to be taught in that tutorial. So I don't think it's a problem, but Redis and MongoDB are not necessarily equivalent technologies. So this needs a really dedicated technical review. That's really what it comes down to, and we need to decide as a SIG whether we are okay with this change or not. And I think the follow-up for honestly both of these is I will post them in the channel and we will have an asynchronous discussion. But please be aware that this requires a bit of thought. Okay, so the second PR in here is removing master slave from the stateless terminology applications. Again, from the perspective of SIG Docs or of working group naming, we're kind of okay with the change, but it is a paired change in terms of it is also removing MongoDB. TLDR, they both require a bit of thought on our part, and Paul probably isn't going to loop back around at this point to get these PRs over the line. So I think we also need to take over the PR if we want them to merge.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the insight on that. Is there any major pushback other than not feeling necessarily 100% correct between switching those out?
So again, kind of from our perspective, like the example still makes sense. And it's not so much pushback as it makes sense, but it's not using a necessarily one-to-one equivalent technology. From my perspective with both hats on, I think it's a fine replacement. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I kind of think Paul is a well-known contributor, and he is making improvements and probably updating the tutorial to use a more blessed technology. So
yeah, and I know this came up a couple weeks back, and I took a look at it, and I fear that we're going to get kind of lost in this kind of this discussion about the technologies being used or being replaced. And I don't think there's one sole owner that's going to have the answer saying, yeah, let's merge this as is, or, let's talk technology and talk about the technology solutions that we're using. I'm tempted to say, as long as there's not a major objection or technical reason why, if this looks sound and technically is accurate, my vote or my gut says we should merge this and deal with any sort of implications after that. I would imagine that things like Redis and MongoDB in the example sense that we're replacing here, I doubt that those are being ran in production. I hope that they're not being followed like blindly into production or causing any sort of impact of that nature. I could see there being a technology discussion about Redis versus MongoDB, but I feel like that discussion could be had before this before this PR even existed, saying why is Redis the technology of choice, you know?
And I think this kind of brings up another just general Kubernetes issue, which is who owns examples, and the answer is like, and frankly, given that there is no specific owner, I think if from a SIG doc perspective, we are okay with it, and we regardless of the technology. I'm kind of with you on that.
You're breaking up there, Celeste. I'm not sure if we lost you there. Tim, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I want to emphasize, Celeste, you pointed out that there's some need for technical review, and there's a few unresolved questions. Things like Paul has used his own container image registry or his own container image. So not the end of the world, but we would typically use a Kubernetes container image and a Kubernetes container registry. So let's basically, I caution against jumping in for full approval. What I'm not hearing is any objection in the technology change or the objection to the intention of the PRs.
Yeah, I agree. And this is why, like, we're going to have to take over these PRs to get them over the line, and probably take Paul's image and use a Kubernetes container image, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it also needs a volunteer to help push it over the line.
Yeah, let me informally volunteer to help drive those over the line.
Okay.
I don't want to go on the record there, even though I'm on recording saying it, but yeah, no, I'll take a look at those, and I agree, and I appreciate the heads up, Tim. I completely agree. If they're using a personal repo or anything like that, there's still technical review to be had, still the docs review to be had, but I think we take away the discussion about MongoDB versus Redis. This is moving in a general direction of greater good. Let's get this thing rolling, and I'll do what I can do to unblock it.
I also want to put out, like, anyone on this call, you are all in the target audience for checking this PR. Because the real thing we want to do is find out if this documentation makes sense to people who aren't good at Kubernetes. So if you are good at Kubernetes, well, you can check that. And if you aren't good at Kubernetes, you can check that. So everyone is like, anyone who wants to volunteer, you're okay for it. You're in the audience.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Tim. And I would encourage folks who have a little bit of time to kill, take a look at the PR that's proposed, and just walk through the examples, see how it works on your machine. You know, it's a lot of the ways that I do my technical testing.
Which ones are the issues and PRs? Is it 393 and 22934 that's on the meeting agenda?
I believe so.
Okay.
To make things easier, Jim, I propose I will put a link to the preview, the PR and the preview link in the chat.
Perfect.
I'll do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That way, so folks aren't having to go in the PR and looking at the changes. They can look at the proposed change in a preview website and just follow those directly through. You know, some of the folks who are new joining us in the call is 100% okay and encouraged just to comment on one of these PRs as a complete flyby, saying, hey, look, I went through these instructions. Things broke, things didn't break, things went well, things didn't go well. That's incredibly valuable. You don't need to know any fancy terminology or hashtags or slashes or any of that stuff. Just a drive-by saying, hey, I followed these instructions and they worked is awesome. So I'll throw that out there as well. There's no magic or beauty behind reviewing the technical aspect of those PRs. Cool. Anything else on that, Celeste, or do we hit it?
I am good. Thank you so much.
Sweet. And I'll be messaging you as I make some progress on that as well. All right, moving on. Tim, do you want to take this one away?
Sure, yeah. Let me just, I don't have the right things on screen, but I know roughly what it's about. Yeah, so this is an issue from the steering committee, really. raised by Jordan Liggett. And it's about the announcement banner mechanism. And it's also about the announcement banners. So outside of SIG Docs, the steering committee has agreed that the steering committee is responsible for banners and sort of the public image of the Kubernetes project. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a settled discussion. Steering committee is entitled to make that choice, and I'm happy with it. But we need a mechanism to make that possible. And so just earlier today, Irvi, one of the chairs, put in place the last piece for one of two prongs of my approach to fixing this. And so my two prongs for fixing this are, first of all, a mechanism to automatically trigger a Netlify deploy. That's now live. And so I'm going to circle back. I will come back to the announcement banners, but I'm going to circle back and talk about the blog. This change that's shipped means that if you put a blog article up, it will now automatically publish. I will drop an announcement in Slack as well to make that clear, and I'll mention it in the blog channel. So does anyone have questions about the automatic publishing? I've kind of been quite quick about talking about that there.
Is this still related to the 25759 banner PR, or is this two separate PRs?
Yeah, okay. Maybe I should go high level. What we're going to do is we're going to have a PR that looks at what the date is and sets the banners based on what banners are configured for that date. There'll only ever be one banner, but you could have like a long-term banner, like we've had at the moment. We've got a long-term banner about Black Lives Matter. But then for KubeCon, we've gone short-term KubeCon banner and then go back to the long-term banner. We've done that through human effort, and it's not really a good use of people's time to be managing banners like that when computers can do the job well enough. However, to make something honor the date and so on, we need the builds to happen automatically. And so that's that PR that's already landed, that's in. So twice a day, Netlify will trigger a build of the site. Like I say, it's only landed about an hour ago, so I don't know if it works, but it does for kubernetes.dev, so I think it'll work for kubernetes.io. And then the second PR that's there for this issue is to put in place a new mechanism that Karen Bradshaw's looked at, Jordan's looked at, a few people have looked at. That's PR, I don't know the number, but I'm going to look.
I think that might be the 25759.
25769 is the PR. Implement announcements as data-driven content. So the mechanism I've used is that there is a YAML file in its own directory, and there's an owners file saying that the steering committee are the approvers for changes there. Let me put a link to that in the chat. That PR might need a tweak or two. Everyone who's got access to GitHub is welcome to look at the implementation, to provide constructive feedback, to ask questions if it's not clear. But the idea there is that the steering committee will be able to approve changes. Someone who's doing communications can propose a pull request, and then the steering committee can provide final sign-off to say, yes, we're going to schedule a new banner, or we're going to change the date or whatever. You've got optional CSS, you've got optional titles, all banners have to have a message, and Hugo's doing this. I think it'll be a good change.
This is very cleverly done. That's my kind of initial take. Yeah, I totally agree with all of this.
Should work. It's going to change every page on the site. It's going to change the front page of the site. So it's a high visibility thing. It is the sort of issue we should call out in weekly meetings so that people are aware that the stuff is happening.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, this is awesome. I definitely need to dive deeper into some of the implementation pieces of it, but from high level, looks great. And from our perspective, I know it's a high visibility change. we can definitely reiterate this in our weekly meetings, but is there anything needed from Docs as a whole to help unblock, move this forward? Is there anything currently holding it up?
No, thanks. So Jim and Ivy have today been helpful at unblocking the automatic deploys things. Given the time of year, I'm not feeling blocked on this. I'm feeling that I've been supported. So thank you.
Awesome. Cool. I'm making a note here to bring that up weekly. I do agree that until that's totally merged in, I think it's good just to touch point on, even if at the very least for general awareness. Cool. Any other issues or PRs before moving on that folks want to discuss about that might not have been included in the agenda? Tim?
So I'll just mention that because I'm working on this, I'm not working on the really good work that Philippe Martin was doing around the API reference documentation. And when I have a bit more time, I hope to look back at that again because it was really good work.
Cool. Yeah, I agree to that. And if folks have a link to the API ref work that Philippe was doing and could throw it in the chat, I could link that in the agenda, or if you just want to throw it directly in the agenda, that would help out. Cool.
I'll take that out.
Awesome. Well, I wouldn't move too quick. You do have the next item here under discussion for the PR Wranglers. Tim, was this just about the absence of the PR Wranglers, or is there something further you want to talk about?
Yeah, so basically, I put that on before Brad did the work. So thanks, Brad.
See, Brad's working in the future right now, so we're all good. All right. So that brings us to the end of our written agenda. Is there anything else that folks want to bring up or discuss? All right, now hearing a bunch of folks speaking up. Hope everyone had a great holiday and looking forward to 2021. Talk to y'all later.
Goodbye.
Everyone.